The 1960s was a period of radical reform in the United States. The Vietnam War was escalating at an astronomical pace, and the civil rights movement was giving citizens of all races the rights that they deserve. However, gay, lesbian, and transgender citizens in America were still not receiving the respect that they deserve. Because of the discrimination that these people faced, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender movement took the United States by storm. In a matter of months, protests occurred, riots ensued, and chaos erupted. Homosexuality was considered more than a crime, but a mental illness diagnosed by psychiatrists who attempted to treat homosexuals through lobotomies. In certain states, such as California and Pennsylvania, simply revealing that you were a homosexual could cause you to be admitted to a mental hospital, possibly for life.
The 1960s and 70s were a trying time for gays. In the 60s, the laws of the United States with regard to homosexuality were some of the strictest in the world. In fact, the U.S. had stricter laws than their communist enemies, the Soviet Union and China. When the LGBT movement finally took off during the 60s, the laws of the United States began to change. The first act towards legalizing homosexuality in the U.S. was in Louisiana in 1962, when they legalized homosexuality in private places. Significant progress in the government stalled for several years, despite the fact that in 1973, homosexuality was removed from the American Psychiatric Association's list of psychiatric disorders.
Tragedy struck the gay community when in 1978, San Francisco City Supervisor Harvey Milk, the first openly gay man to be elected into San Francisco's government, was killed.
Progress was made in 1980 when the court case Aaron Frick versus Richard B. Lynch occurred. Aaron Frick was a Cumberland high school student who was denied permission to bring a male date to his prom. He challenged this by stating that his First Amendment rights were being violated, and a U.S. district attorney then ruled that it was indeed a violation of First Amendment rights to deny same-sex couples the same benefits received by co-eds. Frick was then allowed to bring his date to the prom. It have made me see that you could make a difference. So you had masses, the women's movement was just starting, and of course, as a woman, I was able to jump on board.
There are a lot of kids here. And if we catch you with a homosexual, the rest of your life will be a living hell. And you will be caught. Don't think you won't be caught.
I was identifying first just as a woman, not as a lesbian, because I had only just come out. But as a woman, there was a lot of things that going on that still made you feel very powerful, and that you did, in fact, have an opportunity here to really make a difference. I still feel that way. I still feel like a rebel. So it did impact me quite a bit. Did I know that these movements were going to be so historic as they certainly are? No, I didn't. I didn't know. It goes back to civil rights for me. I should have the same rights as everyone else. I should have the same civil rights as every other person in America, but I don't.
One of the most prominent events during the LGBT movement was the incident at the Stonewall Inn. On June 28, 1969, at 1:20 in the morning, police officers in Greenwich Village, New York City, raided a gay bar, the Stonewall Inn. Officers planned on checking ID, checking bargoers' genders, and arresting those whose clothing didn't match up with their identified sex. Raiding gay bars wasn't an uncommon activity of police officers at the time, but the gay community was getting fed up with the raids and unfair treatment. That night at the Stonewall Inn, tension rose and broke out into a riot.
The New York police came. All of a sudden, pandemonium broke loose.
In the civil rights movement, we ran from the police. That night, the police ran from us.
The opinion survey indicates that sentiment is against permitting homosexual relationships without legal punishment.
At 1 in the morning, a huge crowd of people were just gathered around the inn. There were people resisting arrest. Rioters were throwing anything they could find at the police. I was just down in the street as it was happening. The police were hitting people with clubs, handcuffing the homosexuals. Everyone was screaming, and you could hear shouting and screaming all over Greenwich Village. When people were battling with police officers, they'd be screaming gay power. The crowd kept getting larger and larger.
During the 1960s, gay and lesbians in America constantly lived in fear of being admitted to a mental hospital. The amount of medical authorities was overpowering, and many homosexuals were sent to mental hospitals or asylums because it was believed that homosexuality was a mental defect, maybe even a form of psychopathy. A New York psychoanalyst by the name of Dr. Charles Socarides studied at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine. At the school, he as well as other students were taught that homosexuality is formed in the first 3 years of life, and that no one is born homosexual. It was common for psychiatrists to persuade a patient into being heterosexual. If the psychiatrist failed to persuade him or her, then they turned to aversive conditioning, which is when the patient was forced to watch pornography. If the patient got excited by a homosexual act, they would be given an electric shock. The main treatments that homosexuals were subjected to included sterilization, medical procedures such as lobotomies, and even castrations. Doctors believed that these methods would cure homosexuality, but in reality, these forms of treatment turned homosexuals into vegetables. Dr. Walter J. Freeman performed lobotomies on many patients. According to records, he treated over 4,000 patients this way around America, and it is estimated that nearly 30% to 40% were homosexuals. One of the most well-known institutions for treating homosexuals was Atascadero in California.
Somebody that I knew that was older than me was sent to this institution. His family had him sent off where they go up and damage the frontal part of the brain. The last time I saw him, he was a walking vegetable because he was homosexual.
Because in the 1960s, homosexuality was considered a crime and wasn't even a possibility to get married. Slowly, progress began being made. In 1970, on June 28th, the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots was celebrated by the first United States Lesbian and Gay Pride March. Today, it's still a tradition, and every year there is an annual Gay Pride March in New York City, as well as other places around the country. In 1972, an ABC movie, That Certain Summer, was believed to be the first gay couple on TV.
Today, the gay-lesbian movement has come a long way since its beginning. Iowa, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Delaware, Washington, the District of Columbia, and Rhode Island all allow same-sex marriage as of 2013. More states are continuing to push for equal marriage rights, and society is becoming more accepting and open with the idea.